All right. Hey, guys. Welcome to IronTrap Podcast, whatever we call this.
Hello.
We're like 30 episodes in and still deciding on what name to call it, but
Can't commit.
yeah. Welcome to our weekly podcast. This is one of our visual podcasts. So if you're listening, you could head to YouTube and see some cool clips that I drop in over top. If you're on YouTube, we do one every week, audio only. So you can head to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen, and listen to it there.
Yeah, and we try and we're now putting one out every week.
Yep.
So if you aren't aware, if you only watch YouTube, if you want something to listen to while you're driving or working or whatever, we're now doing one weekly. So it's kind of fun finding topics. And as we get into this winter, we'll probably do some more interview ones. In the beginning of the podcast, we were doing only interviews, and then it got, typical of us, we ramped everything up. So getting a person interview every week is a little difficult. So we're going to, over the winter, probably if we do some trips and different things and get with people in the off season of car stuff, we can hopefully do some of these with some other people. It'll be pretty interesting. So
How is that comfortable, dude? You're like hanging off.
don't mind Moon. He's probably going to be a nuisance the whole time. So today's topic that we're talking about, and we did a little bit of it. It seemed to be kind of popular in the last. You're gonna lay there, okay. In the one we did where it was like our favorite cars or dream car finds or any of that kind of stuff, we kind of decided, and we did a little bit of storytelling of the business starting and early days of what I was doing before we did the channel. So we thought it'd be good to kind of do some of the talking points. So kind of going off the same idea, people often ask us when they come to visit or we see them at Hershey or Carlisle, what's your craziest find, or what's the thing that, you're most excited about, or, what was the craziest, purchase or estate or whatever. So I think I touched on the 34s in Michigan in one of the...
Yeah, I think this one we talked about the 34 estate as a whole, the one podcast. So I think we're going to try and keep this one to pre-quote-unquote business, parts business. So like before, because we've done some pretty crazy ones as a business, but Matt's gone into some pretty crazy ones. We were kind of running a business, but it wasn't like a full-fledged 9 to 5. It was just on your free time for the most part.
Yeah, just I was still working at Eastwood, or even, pre-Eastwood, I was doing a lot of this. But during, when I was working full-time for Eastwood, I was probably putting in full-time hours on top of working a full-time job. But he's going to roll into that camera.
He's like an inch away from the camera stand.
So there was a bunch of them that we did, but I could, talk for days about different stories of adventures and finding stuff, which we would definitely get into some. But the one probably that was most impactful to myself and the channel, which really kind of changed things for me as far as stepping up the level of stuff that I had, was when we did the video and the finds when we got the Ardan and the eye-towel blowers and stuff like that, which kind of catapulted my collection and collecting to another level.
100%.
So we figured we got to talk about the storytelling of a little bit of that, and what happened to a lot of the parts and the stuff, and there was a lot. Like, unfortunately, that video I did was just an afterthought because I didn't know that auction or estate was going to be that crazy.
And you were by yourself,
Yes.
2 auctioneers. Like, impossible to be in the right frame of mind to even try and film, because you're running around like a nut.
There would have been no way, because I wouldn't have been able to buy what I even was able to buy if I was trying to film stuff. So I didn't even think about the channel at that point. I was just thinking about how the hell do I buy as much as I can buy with the money I have.
Yeah.
So
What's funny is that video, again, some of our afterthought videos do insanely well.
Yeah.
That video has over like 200,000 or 300,000 views, and it was literally just you unloading the truck, and then a little bit you went back the next day to pick up some parts, and it was just like, and then we showed everything we bought. So there was not a whole lot of thought behind the video, and it did insanely well. Obviously, because there's an Ardan, said Ardan heads in the thumbnail, of course.
Yeah, that made, and everybody was, a lot of people are obviously anytime that stuff's in the any type of collecting, when something is unearthed that's like really rare or holy grail, of course you send it. I mean, it's the same with us. If I see somebody finds a crazy car or something, I send it to Mike. So it's like that was a fortunate. You were fortunate because of the topic. People were okay with the crappy filming of it all, and you got to see me be like a little kid on Christmas Day. It was
The
pretty,
Nintendo.
yeah, it was pretty crazy. So, but yeah, so for the storytelling side of it, really to probably go backwards a little bit. When I was doing, for years, I had been doing, going to auctions, and that's really how I kind of got heavily started making real money buying and selling. Was going pre-COVID in our area, state auctions were insane. In our part of the country, specifically, like the Pennsylvania, pretty much Pennsylvania in particular, is crazy for estate auctions in the summer. And before COVID and most all estate auctions going online, pretty much any Saturday of the summer in a 100-mile radius, there was 30 to 50 auctions.
Any day of the week, there's 10.
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, they do them Monday, there's no day off. It's 7 days a week, and it's...
But on the weekends, it's crazy.
Yes, the weekends, it's the biggest.
Especially Saturdays. So, and there's, 2-3 day auctions. So when I worked at Eastwood, that was kind of like how I planned my week, because I was so obsessed with finding treasure, and going to these estate auctions were like, they were really neat, because basically there's a the kind of, I'm getting ahead of myself, there's basically a website that you can go to kind of, they give you a calendar and you could search by mile radius, and they pretty much list any estate auction that's coming up. It's one of the biggest websites. There's a few of them, and basically I just started using this one website, and I would just search in say it was Wednesday and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do for the weekend. I would search in 100 or 150-mile radius of my area, and then I'd go through and I'd look at every photo and every auction and just kind of figure out which one I was going to go to that weekend. And I started, it started getting crazy, like Mike's saying. There were like every day or night of the week. So it got to the point where like I'd get done work on a Wednesday and immediately leave and go to some random fire hall.
It's not random. It's at the same fire hall. I drive by it every Wednesday.
Yeah.
Like there's fire halls all over the state that hold an estate auction, just a rummage, sale any day of the week. It's kind of wild.
Yeah. So a lot of the auctioneers, they rent fire halls or community centers. And if they, previously before COVID, everything has now changed. Before COVID, a lot of the auctioneers, they would pick their local fire hall or community center, and they would rent it every, Wednesday or Friday or Thursday, whatever it is. And they would just basically take, estates would bring stuff in, Monday or Sunday was their drop-off day, and then Wednesday they would just auction off whatever they got. There was no rhyme or reason. So, there's ones like on, Monday in our area, there's one every Monday during the day, and what I used to do is I'd go, like they started real early at like 6:30 or 7 a.m., so I didn't start work till 9. So sometimes I would get up early, go to the auction for the first 2 hours, see what I could buy, and then head to work. Some other ones I'd go after work. So it got to the point where I pretty much was mapping out my week by whatever auctions were going on. And some of them I was, on the weekends, I was getting up and driving 100, 200 miles to go to an auction on a hunch, because you'd see some photos and there'd be like a set of flathead finned heads, and you're seeing, the right kind of stuff, and you'd be like, I'm going to take a drive and take a gamble. And before the channel, I did all that by myself. I didn't tell anybody. I just would go. I enjoyed doing it, and it was better going on your own because there was no distractions. Like when I go to an auction now, it's very difficult for me because a lot of people recognize me or us. If I'm going now, I have a lot more friends that I know from going to auctions and stuff. So there's times when I like miss things because you're busy BSing, and then they sell that thing you're standing there kind of waiting for, and you're like, oh crap, So when I was going, I was like on a mission. I would go by myself and just stand there all day.
And sometimes you would do multiple auctions in a day.
Oh yeah,
you'd bounce between a couple of them, like they were doing because they on this website they usually map out how their auction day is going to go. So it'd be like, I'm doing car parts at 9 a.m. This one's doing car parts at 1 p.m. I think I can do this one, buy a bunch of stuff, and then leave, and then go to this one and buy a bunch of stuff, and like bounce between all these auctions.
Yeah, and I used to also like most auctioneers, if there's property or vehicles or large items in general, they wait till noon or 1 o'clock to sell them. That's just how it always goes. So there was some auctions where like I knew that they were going to be selling all the junky car parts first thing in the morning, and then there was another auction like an hour from there that was doing cars at 1 or noon. So I would stay for the first couple hours of the first one, or I would run to the other auction to put an absentee bid in, and then head to the other auction. And it was getting pretty crazy for a while there, where I was doing, like Mike said, 2, sometimes 3 auctions in a day. Or you'd have other ones like you'd go to the auction and the stuff you were hoping to buy isn't as good, or your hunch was wrong, and there was literally only those 2, like 1 pair of finned heads and nothing else. And you're like, okay, well, I'm not standing around all day. Let me go to this other one, blah, blah, blah. So it's become even now, it's kind of my like habit every couple nights. I used to do it every night. Now, like every couple nights before I go to sleep, I'll go on the website and just scroll and see what auctions are coming up. Nowadays, it's mostly online, so I'll go on the online auctions and just scroll the bids and see where stuff's at.
He sends me auctions all the time with beer stuff in them. He's like, here, look at this one.
Yeah. So it got to a point where I was like really in tune. I mean, again, if there's anything we could teach you with the process of how we've gotten the channel and the business to where we are, is putting in the hours and the time. So like, every night I was staying up till 1, 2 a.m. looking at every single photo in every auction in a 100-mile radius, and just scrolling and looking and checking photos and zooming in the background.
Yeah, not just looking at the photos in detail.
Yeah.
Which will come into play here in a minute.
Yeah, so there was many times where I'd look at photos and you just get a hunch. I remember one of my first auctions that I found speed equipment at when I decided I was going to make the jump and start just doing the traditional and nostalgic hot rod and custom thing. I went to a farm auction outside of Lancaster that was mainly like household stuff, but there was like I think there was a Model A air compressor setup. So they used to have a conversion where they would lop off the frame, and it was the cowl of a Model A, and they would cut into the cowl and put an air tank, and then they would run 2 of the cylinders would create air pressure, and 2 of the cylinders would run the engine. So they're kind of neat conversions. So I saw that in the photo, which was pretty neat, and there was some other stuff that you could tell the guy was into antique cars. I think there was a couple classic cars that were being sold also. So like I went to that auction and on a hunch, and there was a set of Hawaiian cheater heads that were there, and some other odds and ends. And they were on like these big farm auctions. They'll just pull a farm wagon out, and they just throw everything, all the like miscellaneous stuff. They just throw it on a cart, and the auctioneer stands on the thing and holds it in the air, and it could be a pitchfork, and then it could be a speed part or whatever.
And it's literally no rhyme or reason how they go through the cart. They just pick random stuff up. It's absolute chaos.
Yeah, and everybody crowds around and is pushing in against each other, and you're trying to see. And so I won those set of heads there for, I don't know, it was like $200.
Are they up on the wall over there, or did we sell them later on?
I don't remember. I might have upgraded. There might be NOS ones. I don't remember, but they were like, that was like my first piece of like in the wild speed equipment good speed equipment. I had bought some other stuff, but that was like I found it, and people were like, "You're crazy. Why'd you buy that?" Because the Hawaiian cheater heads, I had been educating myself. They're not stamped Hawaiian anywhere on the front. It's on the back. So, it was pretty cool that I found that. So like that really started fueling me, because I'm like, when you get a hunch or you see the right type of stuff the person has, there may be stuff that the auctioneer didn't photograph because they didn't think anything of it, or maybe they didn't come across it when they first took photos. So I started doing a lot of auctions where I would go and I would score, a lot of stuff that I have in my collection was like stuff like that went to an auction, wasn't photographed. I had a hunch. You get there and they found a porcelain sign stuffed behind a piece of plywood the morning of the auction. So there's no sign buyers there, and you're just bidding against, just normal local yokels and
Yep.
you know whatever. So I got a lot of neat stuff that way. So that's when you know how this whole deal with all the parts we found came about. We were planning on going to and cover. I think it was the second one.
Yeah, it wasn't the first one. It was the
Second one.
Yeah.
The Allentown Drags that's at the Allentown Fairgrounds. We've done videos on it. EJ Kowalski and crew put on a really cool event where they do motorcycle and traditional like flathead powered, mainly early stuff. Drag races on the cinders. We did a video. If you haven't seen it and you're local, you should definitely check it out. And all the events that EJ does and his crew is really, really neat. So we were planning to go to that. I was going to actually drag race my Model A Coupe again, and you know everything was all set. And then like, you know, that was a Saturday, I think.
Yep.
We were supposed to race. So Friday night, typical. I'm looking at photos, you know, at dinner time or before bed, and I'm like, I found this auction, and it was in like the Westchester area, which is maybe an hour from here, not far at all. And I looked at this auction, and I had looked at it like a lot of auctioneers, they'll put an auction up as a placeholder, and they'll just put like a listing of like antique car parts, blah, 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 and like whatever. So I had it kind of saved because it sort of, but there was no photos.
And sometimes they only put a couple photos.
Yes.
And then as it gets closer, there's all of a sudden 800 photos to look through.
Yeah. So this was one of those auctions where they didn't really put, I don't know if there was any photos or not many photos until like literally the day before or 2 days before, whatever it was. And I check back in on these auctions because I would save them and go, all right, well, just let's see what's going on. So I go to check this auction out, and there's a shit ton of photos. And, you know, I start looking at the photos, and it's like, okay, well, there's tons of wheels. And I saw there was like flathead engines just like thrown on pallets. And I'm like, oh, well, that's crazy. And then what kind of started really making me like go, there was like a Ford 9N tractor with a flathead V8 swap in it, and it had fin heads, dual carbs. Like it was like a hot rodded, super cool. Not just like they threw a junky flathead in; it was like a dressed flathead V8 that was put in it, and obviously done nicely. And I'm like, well, that's not your normal
Old man with a 9N tractor.
Yeah, like that. And even like every now and then I go to auctions and you would see like the farmer that did it because he had an old dump truck and he threw it, you know, whatever. This was like a nice.
It was a hot rodded tractor.
It was very cool, and it looked pretty nice. And I'm like, all right, that's weird. So I started really looking at the photos, and I start again, like I do, zooming in on photos and looking at different things. And there's photos of like the attic of the one building. And up in there, and you could just see there's parts just all over the place in the attic. They hadn't even dug them out. And then they started showing, like, you know, a lot of these auctioneers, they'll show photos of the scrap piles because the big thing they want to do is they get the scrappers to come out because they see that there's giant piles of aluminum or metal or whatever. Yep. And that gets the scrappers to come out because that's a whole nother crowd that goes to the auctions. It's the guys that are scrapping. They go and buy a giant mountain of scrap. They buy it cheap. They take it to the scrapyard and make money, which is, you know, a good way to do it. And someday we'll go into maybe a stories. I bought a lot of stuff from scrappers at auctions that was like amazing. I didn't have to buy the scrap pile. I just bought the two things in the pile. And
can you watch the camera, dude? I know you're scratching, but you're like so close to that camera.
Okay. So I started looking at the scrap piles and
ooh, you okay?
Moon,
You okay, bud?
Moon, come on. You're like
running into stuff.
You are being a menace. Come on. Can you pick a spot? Right here. Tell the story, Moon. Anyways. So I started looking at the photos, and there's piles of photos of the scrap piles. And I started looking in the scrap pile photos, and there's broken Halibran quick changes in it. Like obliterated, like blown and broken in half, you know, like, and there was different stuff. Can you stop that? Nobody wants to see that. Stop it. We're going to have to blur that out.
Yes.
Now it's not suitable for children. So I was zooming in on photos. I'm like, whoa, there's quick change. Like, that's crazy. And I started really looking at the photos again and zooming in on the photos of like the upstairs and the piles of stuff that they were just kind of taking. You're like, whoa, there's some race parts in here. And then what tipped me off and put me over the edge is I zoomed in on one of the photos in the upstairs attic area, and they had photos of magnesium Halibran Indy wheels or smoothies, as
Well,
some
the
people.
wheels weren't actually in the photo completely. It was just the corner
Oh,
of one of the wheels.
yeah, you're right. There was like the corner of a wheel in these attic photos, and I'm like, all right, like that alone, this isn't just your normal
Yeah,
stuff.
all the other things were like, maybe it'll be a good auction. And seeing a Halibran Indy wheel, it's like, dude.
Yeah, and the Halibran's broken. You're like, okay, this was somebody that was racing or something. So I thought maybe it was an old racer, that this was just junk. Like a lot of the old racers that I visited, they don't throw anything away. So there's broken stuff they would throw in the attic just in case and whatever. So I'm like, worst case, I go and I buy one Halibran wheel or buy some quick changes to hang on the wall. But I had a hunch. So I texted Mike. I was like, yo, I got to bail. He was going to film for the event. And I was also going to go and race. So I bailed, went to the auction. I remember I could have went to the preview, and I decided not to. The preview was on a
Oh,
Friday.
yeah, also, auctioneer people that don't know auctions, usually they have a preview the day or two before where you can just go look at everything and decide if you're going to go to the auction or not. Now, if you're driving like 5 hours to an auction, that's not reasonable. We've done it a bunch for local auctions. You just go and look and go, I'm not wasting my time.
Well, for whatever reason that day, Friday, I decided not to go to the preview. I don't know. Stuff came up. I don't really
Had to
remember.
work a normal job.
I don't remember what it was, but I didn't go to the preview. So I go to the auction first thing in the morning, and I get there, and usually at this point, I would only go to an auction like an hour ahead of time. Because I kind of was getting educated enough that I could buy stuff. Like when I first started out, I was like using my cell phone to try and look stuff up to make sure that I knew what I wanted to spend. At that point, I was buying and selling a lot, and I was getting I already was so heavy into this stuff at that point that I was like, I didn't have to come 2 hours early or the day before or whatever. So we got there, and I walk in and I start looking around at the pallets on the ground, and there was a flathead that was on the side. And I'm looking at stuff, and somebody recognized me from, I don't know if it was from Eastwood or the channel, because the channel was already going.
Yeah, this was like 2018 or 2019, I'm pretty
sure.
So
we were, at least locally, people were starting to watch the channel a little bit. So some guy recognized me and said, hey, a lot of that like speed equipment stuff you guys talk about in videos, did you go in the garage under the house? And I'm like, no. I was like, I just got here. I'm like third pallet in. I'm looking at stuff, and he goes, you got to go in the garage in there. He's like, there's all kinds of that stuff. Like he didn't even really, I don't think the guy really even knew. He just knew there was finned heads and whatever. So I'm like, okay. He's like, you better go in there because it started in, less than an hour. So I walk in, go under the house. And as soon as I walk in and turn the corner, it was like the most holy shit moment I've ever had in my life. Like walked in, it's like walking into King Tut's tomb.
Yeah.
Like, so I just walk in, the first thing I see is a table full of finned heads and 2 ital or Scott blowers sitting on the table. I'm like, holy crap. And I start walking that table, and it's just like insane stuff, magnetos, intakes, and the whole table is just stacked with like the most amazing.
Yeah, it was all good finned heads too. It wasn't like a table full of more common Offie or Edelbrocks. It was like Allard and
Edelbrock, like block letters and sharp heads, and it was just like crazy. Like the first table, I'm just like, I see these blowers and I'm like shaking. I'm like, holy crap. And I walk a little further and there's more stuff. And then I I look on, I forget what there was. Then I see there's these shelves, and I look on the left and you see there's injection sitting on the, on the top shelf. And I'm like, holy crap. And I'm just like overwhelmed. And I'm kind of trying to like make notes, because sometimes when it's an overwhelming auction like this, I'll like make notes in my phone so that I didn't get sidetracked during the auction. So I'd be like, second table in, I'd write a note to myself that there was something I saw hidden. So I'm writing notes, trying to take my time. Meanwhile, the auction's getting closer to starting. And I like kind of wrap around the tables and get to these shelves. And I get to like the last shelf on the right, the back wall. And there's freaking, I didn't even believe it. I'm like, holy shit, there's Ardan heads. Like,
not one set,
2 sets. I'm like, what the pardon my
We're far enough in where you could say it.
What the fuck? I'm like, holy shit. Like, this is, if there's ever a time to use swear words, this is the time.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God. Like, just like, I couldn't believe it. So I'm like, instantly, like sending Mike a couple photos.
What's the funny part from being on the outside of all this, He just sends me a photo of the Scott. I never got a photo of the Ardan heads right away. He snapped a photo of the 2 Scott blowers sitting on the table and then texted it to me. So I'm at Allentown, and everyone's like, "Where's Matt?" Blah, blah, blah. I was like, "Oh, he's busy. Look at this." And I show him a photo of the 2 Scott blowers, and everyone's like, "What the fuck?" Blah, 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 losing their mind because
Like, where's
of it.
he at? Yeah.
But I never heard from him for like hours.
Yeah.
Because he's obviously in his own zone trying to buy stuff. So it's just like, I got a photo of Scott blowers, and I was like, "So how's it going?" And then like hours go by, and
Like,
then I get
yeah.
another message like, "It's going great." And then it's just so funny because I'm like texting with a girlfriend, just staring at the phone, waiting. Like, what's he gonna say? What's he gonna say?
And I just was, because I just didn't show up early enough. So I showed up. I'm trying to look through all the stuff. And so there's the garage under the house. Then there's like a huge 2-story garage building, barn, for lack of a better term, in the back of the property. There's pallets all out in the front yard of parts. There's stuff like thrown on the hill outside the garage under the house. There's behind the barn, there's all kinds of stuff under an overhang.
And this is just a one-day auction.
One-day auction. And then behind all the overhang, there's probably 200 wheels stacked outside, in 6-foot piles out back too. So I'm trying to okay, I got 1 hour to look at everything and try and rush around and figure out what I want to buy. So I see the heads, I'm obsessing. I'm also with auctions, everybody's it's anonymous unless you see somebody you know. And at this point, there's certain guys I see at auctions that have, unlimited money, or older guys that they will spend whatever it takes to get something.
They're players is what we call them in the early Ford games.
So when you see some of these guys, especially back when we were still kind of getting rolling, I was like, well, if I see this guy or that guy, I'm not buying. I'll be able to buy stuff, but I'm not going to be able to buy Ardan heads or Scott blowers. But I also, in the back of my head, there's a lot of guys that you wouldn't even know any better. There's so many people in this hobby that some of them are anonymous. You see them around, but you don't know how serious they are until you go to an auction like that. And maybe it's a dude that was friends with this gentleman, and he knew all this stuff was here, and he's been waiting to buy it forever. So they're gonna pay up. So I'm like, you know what? I kind of was like, yeah, right. I'm not gonna be able to afford these. They're gonna go crazy, blah blah blah.
And also, to set the scenario, there was a lot of stuff going on that day.
Oh yeah,
Allentown drags, and then there was 2 other auctions that were going on that same day.
Yes.
One had
some Jeeps and a Lincoln Zephyr and some Ford stuff.
Yeah, and I think the other one had some Model T stuff, I think.
Yeah, so
there was a bunch of other stuff going on.
And it was this time of year too. It was October.
Yeah, it was early. It was the fall Allentown drags.
Yeah. So it was just the perfect storm. And I was like, but you know what? There's probably some guys in the crowd that have a lot of money.
Or someone's going to show up as the auction starts.
Yeah, and it's happened to me. I mean, it still happens. It's happened a million times at auctions where I'm standing there and I'm early. I'm looking around and I go, you know what? I think there's only 2 or 3 of us that are real serious. I might have a chance. And then 5 minutes before the auction starts, somebody walks in. You're like, all right, well, that guy and I are going to be butting heads all freaking day. Okay, great. So I kind of wrote it off. So I started rushing around, looking at stuff, writing notes on my phone. Second pile of wheels in is this. Those Halbrand Indies were there, and there was a pair of them, and they were sitting with they were grouped with a set of 5-spoke. I don't remember what they were, but they were another set of race wheels. Blah blah blah. And there's just insane stuff everywhere. So I'm trying to write notes and in my phones, and then they go, okay, we're going to be doing 2 auctioneers. Actually, I lie. At one point, there was 3 auctioneers. Or was it 2? I don't remember. Maybe it was 2, but they were yeah, I think it was 2. They were going to do 2 auctioneers. The one auctioneer was going to start in the back of the building under the overhang and then go to the wheels. The other one was going to start under the house with all the good stuff. And a lot of auctions, they the stuff under the house, they would have waited till noon because it's where all the crazy stuff is. But the auctioneer had no fucking clue.
Yes.
Unfortunately, the gentleman, the people, the family, because this gentleman is alive or was alive. I don't know him, but they hired these people because they were downsizing, and the auctioneer they hired didn't have a clue. And it's sad to say, some of my best scores are because people hired auctioneers that were terrible.
Yes.
And they hired an auctioneer that had no clue, didn't advertise very well, And so the guy they started with the best shit, like literally first thing. Like normally you would start outside in the field with all the stuff thrown on pallets. They started right inside with the best stuff. And I'm like, okay, well.
Off to the races.
And the other thing that was difficult for me was, a little early on in buying and selling, and even today, I mean, it happens even any month, your money varies. I always tell people this, like when you're in this hobby, we're into it for a hobby and also for like for making money, your money goes like this, and it's the same for like, I mean, I guess when you get into the millionaire guys that like are in this hobby, that money, their dip is, do they have 6 million in their account or do they have 5.5 million? Like for us, the dip is much greater. So at that point, I had a dip where I was didn't have a crap ton of spare play money, and our buddy Spencer, who had the yellow T that we were working on in my garage at some of those videos, he had paid me for half the car but still owed me half the money. No big deal. Like we were buddies, so I was fine with it. But like it was about time for him to pay me the rest, but I wasn't in any hurry the last time we talked. So he's like working, and I call him, and I'm like, dude.
And he lives down that way, kind of.
He lived in Philly, so like he wasn't super far. I'm like, dude, I'm in an auction right now, and like I could really use that money that you owe me. Do you think it could come down? Because my whole thing is, like auctions, you write checks. For whatever weird reason, all the old school auctions, you still write personal checks. And as long as you're from the state or the auctioneer kind of knows you or whatever, you write a check and then they don't cash the check till Monday because it's on the weekend. So there is guys that I know that will,
float some money.
They'll float some money. They'll write a check and maybe they got to go pull it from the backyard or whatever they need to do and deposit it. And I don't do that. I never have done that. I only spend the money that I have. I don't do, and even to this day, I don't do a lot of credit. So like I didn't have like 10 credit cards I could run up to $50,000. So I was kind of like, I have this much money to play with and that's it. So I called him and I'm like, dude, I really could use, I forget what it was. Maybe it was like $7,000 or $5,000, whatever it was. It wasn't a ton of money, but I was like, hey, that would really help right now. So unfortunately he was working overtime and he couldn't make it over. So I had whatever money I had, and they started the auction underneath of the house. And that's when Mike was getting radio silence because I'm trying to figure everything out.
Yeah. How am I going to bounce between all these people and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. And I still, as they were about to start the auction, I'm like, I don't see anyone around that like is like a hot rod or swap meet guy that I recognized. I saw some guys that I recognized, but there wasn't like, the guys that you see at auctions that like they buy the good stuff, and they weren't there. So they started auctioneering the little hill outside of the garage under the house. And like, this was the crap that they literally just threw on the ground, on the grass, on the hill. Like it was like crap that was in their way and they just threw it on the ground. Like, so I'm like looking through these piles of stuff and there's like tack drives for magnetos and there's like there was blower parts all over the property. Like you'd open a box, and they wouldn't keep anything together. So you'd open a box and there was a bunch of Scott blower pulleys like in a random box that was like across the field or whatever. So like this hill was a smattering of that type of stuff. And I'm like, what the heck? So they start the auction and some of the stuff was going kind of high, I guess you could say. And I think there was some tables of stuff out front of there they started on. And like, I wouldn't say the stuff was going high, but it was going reasonable, but not cheap. And I'm like, oh man, this is going to be a long, long day. But again, this was all box lot stuff. So it wasn't like it was real crazy stuff, but like some of the box lots that I thought would have went for $50 were going for $200. But there was probably stuff in the bottom of that box that people knew. There was also a guy there that was like, some of these auctions you go to, there's guys that have a lot of money that they just kind of like, they bid until everybody else stops because they just think everybody else is a cheap ass.
Yeah.
So there was a guy like that was just like, I don't think he really knew what he was buying, but he looked at the box and goes, there's 20 items in that box. It's got to be worth $200, whatever. So they got through all that stuff, and then we walked in the building, and I'm like shaking. No, I wasn't like, I was like, oh God, here we go. This is like one of the
I can
most.
spend all my money on one item, or I'm gonna buy a bunch.
Yeah. So we got in, and it was very tough because I only had so much money.
And they didn't start with the Ardan heads.
No.
That was like towards the end of all of
That
that,
was
right?
like at the end of the building. And I'm like, okay, well, let's see how this is going to go. So I stand right up front, and they start auctioning some like finned heads and some chrome water pumps. And I remember there was like a set of chrome water pumps I wanted for something, and they went for like $150, and I was like, or whatever, 100 and a quarter. And I'm like, damn, that for an auction, that's kind of like a lot of money for used old chrome pumps. Like, given a Hershey, different thing, but like at an auction, I'm like, that's kind of weird. So they get up, first table or second table, they get to the blowers, and I'm like right up front. I was like, man, I'd love to have a Scott blower. I never had a chance to try and buy one. So the first one goes up. I think it was the small one. I don't remember, to be honest. Maybe it was the bigger one went up, and I think I got it for two or 2,000 or $2,500. I can't remember, but it was pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
It's a little stuck. Like you could tell it wasn't. I think it went fairly. Or no, I lie. It was the big one. The big one I got for that turned. That's on the Ardan. That one I spent like 2,000 or 2,500 for, and I was like, okay, well that's like a good ass deal. I just knew that I knew what Scott's and big Scott's went for. So then they went to the next one, which didn't turn or was sticky, and it was the smaller one that's more meant for a normal flathead, not an overhead valve engine. And I think I paid like $900 or $1,100 for that one.
The intakes go for $700-800.
Oh, I forgot to mention that. Both of them were sitting on Scott or ITEL intakes. And they had, like, the big one had, like, a plate on it for carbs, and there was extra stuff, like, in it or on them. So, like, in my head, I'm like, well, like Mike's saying, I'm like, well, the intakes are worth $800 to $1,000 a piece. So, like, I bought the big blower for essentially, like, $1,000 or $1,200, and then it came with the intake. And the other one I paid, like, if it was over $1,000, it wasn't much. I don't remember. So I was like, and they went back to back, so I won both things. So instantly people were like, holy shit, that's the dude.
Yeah.
And I know how auctions work. When these really big auctions, a lot of times once you start stepping up for a couple items, or you win multiple items in a row, sometimes people will just back off because they're like, well, I can't.
He's going to buy it.
He's going to, much like I was talking about some of the better people, but I wasn't paying crazy money, but that's just how people like work. So I started, I knew I could kind of, once that happened, I was like, there's no one else in this room that I think knows as much as I do about what's here, because the only dude that was bidding against me was a reseller guy that I would see around who he would buy anything. He brought his iPad, he would go to the preview, look stuff up. Seems like a really analytical guy, and he would just probably write. He would probably go home at night, go on eBay, and go, all right, well, the last Scott blower I saw sell went for this. And then he would only want to pay half of that or whatever. So, like, I was like, all right, well, he's the only guy because he probably went through and wrote all this stuff down. But there was, like, no one else there. And I'm like, well, shit, if I'm willing to go, like, on the stuff I really want, if I'm willing to go to 80% of retail, I'll probably buy everything I want. Now, not really able to resell at that point very well. So I bought those blowers, and I was like, oh, shit, it's on. So then I'm like running around. I think I grabbed those blowers and ran them to my truck because I was like, I don't want them to go missing. Threw them in my truck. But then, meanwhile, the auctioneer's in the back selling the like antique stuff, about to get to the wheels. So I kept running across this property, up and down this hill, probably like 100 yards apart or 50 yards apart maybe. And I'm like, I would run down, see where he's at, and then I'd run back up. So I missed like a set of Allard heads sold that I missed because I was running back and forth. And I would buy up top, and then I'd run down and whatever. And I really wanted those magnesium wheels because they're just...
It's just the roof creaking, dude.
Hey! Knock it off. Up or down? Quiet.
Grumpy old man.
Go lay down. Come on. Come on back up here. Come on, Grumbly. My God.
Oh, I got the head? Oh, lucky me.
Oh, I got some more space.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and at that point you're the. I don't. I think I sent you I sent you photos of the two blowers like sitting in my back seat or something.
Yeah, and there was other stuff too because you bought some finned heads and up to that
Yeah.
point.
I can't even remember what that stuff was, but
Yeah.
it was like
I'll have to look. Maybe I have all of our. I might have photos of all that stuff. From
I
back
think
then.
I might still have the back seat photo saved in my phone because it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
But there was like the blower stacked and some stuff, and then it's like, so I was running back and forth. I ran down, and luckily with me doing auctions for so many years, I've always had a game plan. So a lot of these auctions you go to, there's a couple things you'd really like to own, and then you try and at that point just buy enough stuff that you can kind of pay for or balance
Yeah.
out your bill. So I was running down and buying wheels, and there was like stacks of like 16-inch wire wheels that were 6 foot tall, and they were going for like $40. And there was like one dude and myself that was down there at the wheels. Like after the antiques sold, all the antique dealers kind of like they went elsewhere, and it was like basically like 10 of us standing down at the wheels, and it was me and one other guy, and we're literally taking turns. Like I'm trying to be nice with the guy. I could have bought all the stacks because we were paying like $25 a stack of wheels. And then I would go, all right, go ahead, you can have this one. Like
Yeah.
I wouldn't. I just knew which stacks I really wanted. So we were like buying stacks of wheels for nothing, And finally, eventually, after running around, they got to the stack where those wheels were, and I think I paid. People are gonna hate us. I think I paid $300 for like it was two 18-inch Indy wheel Halbrand wheels. There was a set of 4 5-spoke Americans or something. I can't remember what they were, and like those were really good on their own for like more muscle car era stuff. And then there was some other wheels mixed in, and it was like $300 or $400. I was like, holy shit!
If that doesn't offend you, just wait. It gets worse.
Yeah, and then but yeah, then it was just like insanity. So I ran back up, went in the upstairs area, and just waited, as they were buying stuff. Stuff was just like insane. So
Is
like
that where that item in the bag got sold? Was it?
that was a little later.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
that was later in the day. But so it was just like, for instance, they got through all the tables and they got to the shelves, and it was like they were doing it by the shelf. So like little gray, shelves you would have in your basement, metal shelves, not pallet racking, and there would be like 10 items on the shelf. All right, top shelf. First rack, one money. And you're like, there's like an NOS Vertex mag. There's injection. There's like, they weren't like, there was amazing stuff, and they weren't like, all right, just the injection. So there was a lot of people in this basement. Everybody's crowded in there. And there's people getting pissed off because they're like, well, I want to bid on the injection. They're like, nope, one money, buy the whole thing, $100 to start. And like people were getting pissed. And I was like, whatever, So I bought one of the shelves. I bought an NOS Vertex mag that was for. It was written on it. I think it said, I think I still have the box, maybe. I don't know if it said Ardun, but it said something about injection on it. Mm-hmm. So it was like for a right angle drive for flathead that had injection. I don't know. But it was redone, and it was back in the Vertex box, which was cool. And you would buy a shelf for one thing, and then you'd start clearing the shelf off, and there was like tack drives, or there's, whatever, right angle drive that was in the bottom of the box of stuff there. And people were I couldn't keep up, Again, I only had so much money, so I'm like, all right, I bought these blowers. That's like a huge chunk of my money right there in the first 2 items.
Trying to do math in your head while also trying to bid. And
and then there's like 10% buyer's premium, and I'm like, oh my God. So I was writing this stuff down in my phone, what I would win, the big items. So we're getting around, and we're getting close to the heads, and it was like, then I knew, I think once the auction got to that far, that I got those Indy wheels and the blowers for cheap, it was kind of became fun, because I was like, all right, I have enough money that I think I could buy a set of these heads, even at what those heads go for, low-end retail.
Yeah.
For a used unknown set. I'm like, I think I could be a player on these. Like, I don't know if I could pay crazy money, but we'll see. So we start getting close, and I start just messing around, and like we do, we chatter with the auctioneers and stuff, which pisses some of them
Basically,
off.
We're just talking shit.
We're just talking shit,
essentially.
riling the crowd up. So they get to they get all the way over to the Ardan heads, and they're like, all right, we got these shelves. There was 2 sets of heads. I knew I didn't have enough money to buy both sets, unfortunately, that day. And the one set of heads, the rocker covers, somebody had ground off crudely the Ardan logo. And obviously, like, the logo is everything. I mean, like, why do we buy a Finn set of heads? Because of the fucking stupid script of whatever company is obscure. Yeah. You grind that script off of those heads, they're instantly, like, worthless. So it's like, yes, Ardan heads, there's a lot more than the rocker covers, but, like, that you want that logo on the rocker covers because, you know, if you want to actually run them. So that's kind of what I looked at. Like, I wasn't educated on Ardan. Like, I had looked at Ardans, obsessed over them like everybody else, but, like, I didn't know the differences now that I know, that we've learned a lot from Ron.
Yep.
And just having them, that, like, there's early and late heads, there's all these weird differences, what's included. So, like, I didn't even think to take like an inventory of what was with them, because the rocker covers were just like slid on, or, you know, whatever, one bolt in them. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't like, I better check to see if these heads have rockers in them.
Yeah.
Or are the valves in them, or are they...
Wasn't there something weird mixed up between the heads to begin with before they started to auction them?
Yeah, they had...
Wasn't like there was like one with Ardan, one ground? Like
yeah, there was some. Yeah,
shelf?
Yeah, there was something weird, or all the rocker covers were on one shelf with one set of heads, and I remember something, and I bitched, and I was like, these aren't even the right. Like, these go with these. You should at least put them, like, whatever. I don't remember what it was, but I did bitch about something. So I decided to buy the set that had good rocker covers, and that shelf also had like a set of Wyand full race heads. I think there was like a Magneto. There was like a bunch of shit plus these Ardan heads. I'm like, holy shit, like, wild. And so I was like, okay, like, we'll see what happens. And they sorted it out. But when the auctioneer started about the auction, he goes, all right, so these heads, like, he's trying to ask the crowd, what are these for? Or, like, he was just trying, I'm like, what is it? Or what are they? Or, like, trying to be a dick. And everybody's like, everybody in the crowd knew what they were, you know, knew the name. And they kind of, the auctioneer was not psyched on that.
Yeah.
So they, like, started off at, you know, typical, like, $50 or $100. $100. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? So I think I ended up, again, it's hard to remember, but I think I spent under $3,000 for those heads.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it was like $2,500.
It was $3,000. Yeah, it was somewhere between $2,500 and $3,000 for the set of heads. Now, the part that was difficult is I won my set first. Or no, I can't remember now.
I think you won your set first.
Yeah, and then I was too reserved on the other set because I think I ran them up to like the same as what I paid for my set, and I let them go. So that the younger guy my age that was buying a reseller that had the iPad and stuff, he ended up winning them. Not an early Ford guy, not a hot rod guy. He's just a business, you know, doing it for business. So he won them, and realistically, he was bidding against me on the other set. So like, if I would have went to 3,500, I probably would have got them. So I was like, yeah, but it is what it is. But when it happened, I was like, holy crap. Like, I was just like shaking. Like, I cannot freaking believe that I won these. Like, it was kind of like surreal because the auction was so chaotic. I didn't even like, you know, I was like, it was hard to take in. I was also like, imagine, it almost felt like if you were in the middle of a crowd and you won, like, it'd be like in the middle of the crowd or you're at a casino and you win. The fucking machine spits out the jackpot and you get like $100,000 or, you know, whatever, an absurd amount of money, cash, and there's like thousands of people standing on it. Like, that's how it felt like. I was like, I won these and they're now mine, and when you win in an auction, it's your responsibility. It doesn't matter. So I'm like, shit, like, I want to bid on stuff, but I need to get these out of here, but they're still selling and I got to push through a crowd. So like, I was like stacking the heads and trying to carefully walk out and go all the way across the field to my truck. And it was just like super stressful. And the parts I was leaving behind because I had to carry that stuff was like kind of wild. Like, normally at an auction, you wouldn't just leave, you know, that kind of stuff.
Or that kind of stuff behind.
And I'm just leaving it there. And most people at auctions are pretty truthful, pretty honest, but like it happens, stuff goes walking. So, holy crap. And then the auction from there just got like ridiculous because once the good stuff sold, then it like as the day goes on,
Every auction is like that. Once the good stuff sells, it goes downhill quick.
it gets cheaper.
Start doing
and cheaper.
dollar pallets really fast.
Yeah. So I will say before we go, for like everybody's motherfucking me because I finally said what I paid for this stuff. I don't think I've ever publicly said that. I have a shit ton of money into making those heads usable. A fuck ton of money because and this is what if I've learned anything over the years, once you're educated on the usability of rare items, what you're willing to pay changes greatly. Mm-hmm. So like, I'm kind of glad I didn't spend what I was willing to go to because I would have been kind of not underwater, but like I would have probably spent too much money.
Rocker shafts and rocker arms and all that stuff are not cheap.
So I got those things home, super excited, but like I didn't have rocker arms and rocker shafts. And it's like, okay, where do you find you got like some of the rare stuff on the planet and you're missing the rockers. Like people they don't usually get separated very often. And it's like, okay. And none of that had clicked till way later. But that's what I'm trying to like for the people. We get this a lot in the channel where people are like, oh my God. Well, think about it. I spent $3,000 on these heads and then I had to spend, I think I might have spent $2,000 on the rockers.
There's 2 or 3. I can't remember.
Like I spent a good portion of what I paid for the heads, which was a good deal, on just getting rocker shafts. So right there, you're instantly, the price almost doubles of the heads. Then the heads were raced and needed a shit ton of repair and custom parts made to make them usable again. So like I took a gamble and really if that happened again, I would have went higher than I went, but I wouldn't have went nearly as high as I was thinking about going because they weren't, what could potentially happen, you'd be underwater. So if you spent $15,000 on a set of Ardan heads that were used and used up, and then it takes $20,000 to fix them, or you find out that one of the heads is totally not usable because it's damaged, that sucks. So,
big time.
So in my defense, yes, it was cheap, but in the end, I actually picked the worst of the 2 sets of heads because Ron ended up, fun fact, after the auction was over.
Really a year or 2 after, wasn't it?
No, it was pretty quick.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, because the dude advertised the stuff. He started selling heavily, and he found the ham, and he listed the heads on the ham.
Oh, I thought they went on eBay.
No, he listed them on the ham. He might have had them on eBay too, but I think he listed them on the ham. And Ron quickly was made aware of them, and he ended up buying the other sets of heads. He got injection, because I remember the dude won a set of injection. It was on another shelf for cheap. And Ron went and bought the Ardan injection and the heads and some other stuff from the gentleman. And then Ron ended up building the engine. The other shelf of heads, he ended up building an engine and finished it before he even did my engine.
Yeah.
And he said that those heads weren't nearly, while they were ground on and there was some weird stuff, they weren't as damaged or raced. So they were actually much easier to, and I think they had rockers with them.
Yeah.
So in the end, it would have been actually better to buy the other set of heads, but then I wouldn't have had rocker covers. So it was like, who knows? But so ironically enough, Ron ended up
touching both sets,
building both sets into engines, which isn't surprising because he most real Ardans in the country, he's touched at some point. He's aware of them or has touched, or worked on or whatever. So, but it was pretty cool. But anyways, he listed those heads, but the dude that bought them, he actually had a better set in the end as far as usability goes. So yeah, then I think once I got the heads and the blowers in, I took some photos and texted because I was like, whew, I could take a breath.
Yeah.
And it was and also at that point, I had spent between the blowers and the heads and the other bit of stuff I sold, I think I had, maybe I should just say, I think I had $7 or $8 grand.
I think you had $8,600. It pops into my head.
Wow, that's a pretty.
I'm almost positive you had. I remember you texted me like, I have like $8,600 on me. That's all I have to spend. I'm like, do you want me to run to the ATM and get a bunch of money and go to the bank and come meet you? And he's like, no, just stay there and film.
Yeah, so like.
Or 70. It was some weird odd number like that.
Yeah, it was because it's like how it works. Like I probably sold a car for $5 grand and a couple random shit and, or whatever. And that's what I had left, So, and I think it was it after Hershey?
Yeah. Fall. Usually when they do the fall Allentown, it's usually a week or two after Hershey.
So I don't even know if we didn't have a big booth selling then.
No, I don't think you were selling with Pete that year either.
I don't think
that.
Yeah, so I don't even know if I really sold. I probably just went and bought. So I probably had $10,000 or $15,000 before Hershey.
Yeah.
I bought a bunch of dumb shit
and
blew a bunch of money and then went there. So I think I had whatever, $7 or $8 grand, whatever the random number is. So it was like I spent, between the two blowers, I was at like $4 grand or whatever.
It's like 5 because the heads were 3, 2 on the big one, 15 on the small one. It's like $5,500.
Yeah, so that at that point I got, 3 or 4 grand.
Which I will say, at an estate sale, 3 or 4 grand if you're not buying high ticket items can go pretty far.
So that's when I flipped.
Especially after the expensive stuff sells, it gets really cheap. So you're buying a lot of quantity for $2 grand.
So that's where it was like. I flipped the switch and was like, okay, I need to buy stuff to make money on. Like, what do I know that's here? So they started going through and like the pallet lots, and it was just like, there was the one crazy thing that that guy that got those Ardan heads, he must have made a crazy amount. Because I know the money that I made and got to keep blowers and the Ardan heads and the Halbrands. Like, he bought a set of, they were, what are the GT40 like heads? Crazy like big block Ford.
Oh.
Like Cobra heads or something.
Cobra Jet or something
Yeah, they were like Cobra Jet heads that were like sitting on a pallet. And I remember looking and be like, there's something special, but like I didn't run the pallet up because I was trying to save for the stuff I wanted. Well, I watched that dude's eBay afterward, the auction. I was keeping an eye on, and like they were like Cobra Jet heads, and he made a lot of money on
What did he buy in a bag that you missed?
So yeah, we were going through and buying a bunch of stuff, and we were buying pallet loads of stuff. So there was a pallet that had, I don't remember what it was. There was some interesting stuff on the pallet.
Wasn't there like a rebuilt 39 box on it?
That might have been. I don't remember, but there was some neat stuff on the pile, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to bid on this. But like these pallets were literally like, there was just stuff thrown on them and things in trash bags, things in totes, whatever. It was totally unorganized. So like I ran the auction, the bid up to, I don't know, something stupid like $150 and let the dude get it. And as I was like walking by, I don't know if I like kicked the bag or something. I was like, whoa. And then the dude knelt down to see what was in the bag, or maybe he already knew because he had gone to the preview and saw it and knew what he was bidding on. But like he opens the bag and there's a freaking McCullough blower kit for flathead in the trash bag. I was like, my heart dropped. I was like, are you kidding me?
$150.
I was like, Jesus. So yeah, and we went down the line, and the other thing that like I regret, I just couldn't buy at the end of the day. So they were selling these scrap piles. At the end of the day, there was this massive pile that had to be, I don't know. It probably took up the same space as like the Mercury, like a bigger car. That whole area. Just imagine a pile of miscellaneous cool shit. Cadillac flathead engines. There was all kinds of flathead camshafts, like old camshafts, and I was picking up and looking at them, and they were like, there was like one that was like a reverse flow Clay Smith cam. There was like crazy shit, and there was like names attached to it, like they were like out of famous race. Like I don't know if they were out of famous race cars or it was like that racer, ground it or whatever it was. But there was like so much stuff, and the auctioneer sold it all in one shot. He wouldn't let you pull. It was like the end of the day, and he was just over everybody's bullshit. So he sold the whole pile, and it went for like, I don't know, $2,000 or $1,500.
Didn't you buy the whole attic of the barn too?
Yeah, so that was the same. So they did that, and then I did they split the attic in half, and I think I bought
The front half, right?
like the front half of the attic. And like when we went up there and I looked, and I was just like, there was like Hemi heads just sitting there, and like wheels and tires, and just like Mallory distributor, like stuff that normally at a flea market or an estate auction you'd be like, oh man, great. But this was the junk that they didn't feel like dragging downstairs from the attic. And it was like, I don't remember what I paid, $200-$300 for the whole one side of the attic. And when we were unloading that attic the next day, when we came back, it was just like the stuff we were finding was ridiculous.
So basically, you filled, when you left the day of the auction, you basically filled your pickup truck.
Yeah, my
cab and the bed with just stuff.
Yeah, so my F-250 is like a full double cab. So the whole back seat was filled.
Which is aluminum.
Just to the ceiling, basically, with aluminum. The front seat had the Ardan heads on it and a bunch of other crap. And it was like, just packed to the brim. And then the back of the truck, because then it was starting to rain. So, of course, it was like I couldn't put anything good in the back. So I don't even remember what was in the back of the truck. Wheels, tires.
I'll put some video because I have all the video clips.
Oh, yeah. So it was like I had to make this decision then that everything I bought was good. And it was like, now you have to make the decision. It was me by myself, and I only could fill my pickup truck. And it was already late in the day because the auction, the auction went till 2-3 o'clock or whatever. So I'm like, I'm not going to make it back before dark because it's fall. 5 o'clock, it's dark. So I had to kind of run around and be like, all right, well, I don't want this to go missing with this. Yeah. And then I left behind, like we're saying, like Hemi heads and stacks of wheels and tires. And I think I had bought a bunch of stuff in the fence row, like rears and banjo rears and all kinds of crap. And it's like, okay, well, hopefully nobody steals anything. Yeah. So then I remember I called Spencer and told him, fuck you, asshole. I wish I had more money.
Yeah.
By the way, can you also come and help me?
I need screw you for not giving me the money, but I need your help. Please.
I also need your help, buddy.
Please and thank you.
So he was hanging out a lot then. So he came, met me there because it was closer for him. And Andrew was working for us then.
Jason Moss went with too.
Oh, yeah, Jason Moss went. That's right. I forget.
He showed up. I think he came and stayed the weekend.
Yes, Jason was already had planned to come that Sunday because Jason used to come on Sundays and tinker and I think he was building his motorcycle tank or whatever. So he was planning on coming anyways, and I texted him like, change of plans, buddy. We're not working in the shop. We need to
bring work gloves. We got some real stuff.
Yeah, we got some labor to do. So we took my flat trailer, my truck, and Andrew and Jason, and then Spencer met us, and we filled my like 20-foot flat trailer like to the brim and high. And so yeah, we ended up we spent like a whole day there in the pouring rain. It was like the end of the auction, I think it started to rain a little bit, and then overnight we had one of those storms. There was just this time of year we get hurricanes and stuff that remnants that come up, and it was just like pouring rain the whole time, and we're loading like all these wheels and rears and crap, and I remember it was like miserable, but I was like, I couldn't have been more
happier.
Happy.
Yeah,
I couldn't have been any happier. So we got the trailer, the truck loaded. I remember we stopped for Mexican
of course,
and took everything home, and it was just like, then that's when I filmed that video was in the rain. You can actually hear in the video. I unhooked the trailer, I think, and parked it somewhere, and then I backed the truck in with some of the good stuff. Well, no, I shot that video. That's right. I shot the video that night when I got home.
No, that morning, because Jason Moss shows up as you're like unloading the Ardan heads. Because you're unloading the truck, and he walks in. You're like, go look in the passenger seat, and he goes, oh, holy shit.
That's right.
Because the Ardan heads were sitting there. Because you started that video like 6 or 7 in the morning, unloading it before everyone showed up.
Oh, that's right.
And you can just hear it's pouring rain.
Yeah. I might just call him and see if we run up there and grab.
Oh my God, you got.
And 2 Scott blower setups.
Holy shit!
Look at all. Yes.
In the background.
So I was, unloaded the truck, and then we
took off and loaded it again.
So that makes sense why we were so late into the day, because we probably didn't get there till like 10 or something. Yeah. And it was insane. So some of the like other stuff that I got that was wild. Like I got an NOS Allard, like one of these pallet lots I bought had an NOS Allard quick change.
Yep.
So Allard, I don't know. There's a bunch of stories about Allard. So like for instance, I got 2 Allard intakes, flathead dual carb intakes, and Allard basically, from what I understand, it's a copy of an Eddie Myers intake. So the folklore is that whoever Allard or whatever, I don't know the whole names off the top of my head, Mr. Allard, let's say that, went to America and brought back, or a designer brought an Eddie Myers intake back to England, and they copied it and then recast it with the Allard name. Well, something happened with Hallebrand quick changes that they did the same thing. It's a Hallebrand 201 quick change, but it has Allard on the back. This was an NOS one that was never drilled for the bolt pattern and all that stuff. And there was something else Allard that
to just show how much stuff there was. It was literally any free space on the floor in the shop downstairs. There was a full set of cars, and then just shit literally everywhere.
Every flat
you
surface.
couldn't walk like between. There was just a little narrow pathway to walk because there was just stuff everywhere.
Yeah,
and then the outside was just filled with wheels and rears, and it was insane.
But yeah, so I got like 2 or 3 really good Allard items. I don't remember what the other stuff was that I got, but like I got 2 intakes. I ended up selling all the Allard stuff to an Allard collector. I think he might have been in Canada. I don't remember.
You kept one intake though, didn't you?
Yeah, I kept one intake, and I sold the other intake, the quick change, which is I think what he really wanted. And I had read online that those quick changes, almost none of them survived because they had a fire at the factory, and like all that stuff burned up. So there was hardly any of those quick changes known in existence because most of them got ruined. But he wanted that. There was the intake, and there was like some other stuff I don't remember. And he bought it all in one shot, which was cool because it went to an Allard guy and it was going to get reused again. I kept one intake for myself just, to have. And so it was like that stuff that was in there.
There's a bunch of like small block, big block Ford stuff you got too. Flywheels, distributors.
Yeah.
I remember that stuff.
Yeah, it was great because that was the stuff I was getting on pallet lots that I didn't even buy the pallet lot for that. I was buying it for,
Other stuff.
Other stuff. And those like scrap lots that had the broken Hallebrands, they were like in 55-gallon drums. They were just filling it with pieces of aluminum and magnesium and stuff. So that you couldn't see what was in the bottom of the drum, and they were calling it scrap metal. But it was like those drums went for like $100 for the whole, 3 drums and a pile of shit. So that stuff down at the bottom, there was probably some amazing stuff that, they thought was scrap. And I was just, at that point, there was so much I didn't even bid on that stuff. But I think I bought a flathead engine, which we ended up taking apart. And that was the one that was all rebuilt, but was like line board raw. Like, remember, it had the girls in it.
Oh, yeah.
We just got rid of it because it was like, we tried to run it, and it basically ate up a set of bearings in the bottom end.
Yeah.
Like, it looked like a fresh engine. So we think that somebody didn't like they used the wrong caps or something in the line board. And, but like I bought a bunch of, I can't even remember now. You have to put up on the video.
Dude, I'll put some clips up. It was a lot of stuff. I remember doing the leading up to the video, us going through everything you bought was the longest part of the video because it was just like the floor was just covered. Like, what do we?
Yeah.
Did we show all of it? Did we show some of it? That's crazy.
But I ended up in the end, and it's been the formula since I've been doing all of this. I skimmed the best stuff off the top. There was some stuff that I had to sell that I would have liked to keep. And I basically, in the end, made a decent profit. And let's just put it this way. The way it all shook out, my Ardan engine, as it sits in my car now, is free.
Yep.
I paid for the whole entire auction. I kept the Ardan heads, the magnesium, the Hallebrand Indy wheels, which I still have kicking around here to this day. I kept a couple of intakes.
The 2 Scott blowers.
The 2 blowers, and some other random stuff, nothing real crazy, but I kept some other odds and ends, and I sold everything else. And all the money that I made, when I kept track of it, the bill that I paid Ron in the end, even though it was a shit ton of money to build that engine, it's nearly a free engine in the end, which is insane. So like that, at least when we back to the car guy math, that's the way that I consoled myself when I was paying the bill. I'm like, well, I'm spending money that I made off this auction, and
the hard part for you is it was like 5 years between the two.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
That money was long gone and forgotten about.
Long spent. Yeah, it sucked. But I got to keep some, key items in my collection and Holy Grail stuff.
Yeah.
And sure, I sold some stuff that I kind of wish I didn't sell, but like, I sold off a bunch of stuff, got to keep, the best stuff. And I also know that stuff, all the stuff that I didn't buy is still out there in the world. And there were some guys there buying, like the gentleman that bought the huge pile of stuff in the center. I don't know him, but from what I was understood from some other people, he was kind of just a wealthy guy that went to a lot of auctions and just bought in bulk. So somewhere outside of Philly or Delaware or somewhere, Westchester, all that stuff went to that guy's warehouse.
Yeah.
And that stuff's sitting somewhere. And then, because I never saw that stuff pop up publicly. And yes, some of it got sold, but I saw some older guys buying stuff at that sale that I know who they are. And they bought some really good intakes and really good stuff. So, like, this stuff all will come to light again. Like, there'll be chances to buy all that stuff that went back into collections again.
Yeah.
And that's what's so, being into this for a while now, it's kind of exciting that, like, when you're not able to buy something really cool,
but you know where it ends up.
Yeah, and you're like, someday I might have a chance. Like, we've said that before. Like, so-and-so bought this, and it's like, we might be trying to buy that at his
Not
estate.
to be morbid, but we're hopefully going to outlive them. So there's a possibility that I may be able to. They got it over on me once, but one day I'll be able to buy that thing.
Possibly, and it's like Mike said, it's a little morbid, but like we say that, I say it about myself. Like, we're just caretakers of all this stuff, and the great thing about this stuff is that it's not getting thrown away. It's going to get used and cherished forever. So when I'm gone, some other young punk's going to buy this stuff and be excited about it. So
I also want to ask, the gentleman that owned all this stuff was at the auction.
Oh, yeah. Like,
we didn't talk about that.
Yeah, so it was kind of a crazy thing, and I feel I've never gone back and talked to the guy, or I didn't keep in contact. He was at the auction, and the rumor that I heard, I talked to him, really nice guy. His wife was super nice. I noticed at the auction, he stayed in the house. The wife stayed in the house. And a lot of times at these auctions, the family will be outside, they'll bid on stuff, or they'll kind of be like helping the auctioneer, like, hey, that's a whatever. Guy stayed in the house, and I thought that was really odd.
Very strange.
And I learned after the auction, somebody that was at the preview told me that he tried to stop the auction the day before, because I think he realized that the auctioneer didn't know what he was talking about. The auctioneer didn't advertise very well in the preview. There wasn't
literally zero photos of anything car related.
No, there was, but there wasn't of the really good stuff.
Yeah.
And I guess he just got cold feet. And I heard through the grapevine or through somebody that they saw or overheard or witnessed him saying, we got to stop the auction, or we can't have the auction, or whatever. And the rumor I had heard was that the auctioneer, when you sign a contract,
it's a legally binding contract.
Yeah, so like he legally signed over the rights to sell those parts, and the guy was like, if you pull this sale on me or make me cancel it, I'm going to sue you, or whatever happened. The auctioneer threatened him, and he ended up let the auction go. So I think what happened is he was so disgusted with what was going to happen, he just stayed in the house. The other sad thing that I heard is his wife / him, they were moving into like a 55 and up or 60 and up community and downsizing, and he was sort of having his hand forced. So, that sucks.
Yeah, rough. Very rough.
There was definitely a situation there with him and the wife, made a decision to simplify their lives. The wife was super nice. When I saw her, when I bought the stuff in the upstairs and we were cleaning it out, she came up and talked to us and was saying how they had such a wonderful life they had Packards and all kinds of race cars and stuff. And she was fondly talking about years of going to Hershey and driving in old cars on tours. So, like, it was just something where they were downsizing. The unfortunate thing is that the way the stuff was sold by the auctioneer was done in not a good manner, that the stuff was not sold for what it should have gone for.
And we see that a lot with auctions.
Yeah, and that was the one thing that was interesting with the video when I was filming the video and we were watching the comments. There was a lot of comments that people were like attacking me, like I was the one that stole the stuff from the guy, or I raked him over the coals. I went to a public auction and I put my hand up in the air until everybody else stopped bidding.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone on the planet there was people that were arguing that, like, who on the planet's going to go to an auction and you're going to instantly bid
full retail
or 90% of retail. That's not how an auction goes. I don't know anybody in their fucking right mind that does that. If you do, you're kind of an asshole.
And the people that are at fault is the guy that owned it, because he didn't do his due diligence with hiring a reputable or a good auctioneer, and it's the auctioneer's fault because they're a dipshit and they lost money for themselves.
Oh my God,
they could have made a fuck ton more, but they did a terrible job.
Yep.
And they fucked over the guy that owned all of it because they made him an insane amount of not money. Like, they did him such a disservice.
Everybody lost there except for the people that were there buying.
Yeah. Which is usually backwards for an auction. Usually the people buying they're getting a good deal, but they're not buying for dirt cheap, and the auctioneer and the people selling make a good profit.
Yeah, so that was like, we got a lot of comments about that. And it wasn't like I did anything sketchy. Like, I didn't even know the stuff was there, and I just stuck my hand up in the air. And I mean, the only thing I'll say in my defense is like, or not even my defense, at least the stuff that I bought and kept is getting used.
Yeah,
I mean,
got put back on. Whatever you didn't keep and sold went back into the world.
On cars and being used and whatever. So like, that's the whole kind of mantra of what we do. It's like, we want to get the stuff back in circulation and getting used and put on cars and loved by people. This gentleman had so much stuff. The stuff was not getting used, and like, at this point in his life, there's literally mounds of wheels and parts. There was so much stuff that, like, it wasn't getting used and appreciated. I mean, I'm sure he appreciated stuff. I'm not saying he didn't, but like, you have that much stuff.
Well, just the Ardan heads. Both sets are now back out in the world, and they're both on engines.
Running.
Yeah, because the other set ended up in California on a car.
Yeah, it's in a 32 Roadster that is being driven and used around. I think, in fact, I might have saw the car was at LA Roadster show this year in the swap meet, or like driving around, hanging out in the swap meet. So I've seen it photographed at some events.
Yeah. The heads aren't sitting on a shelf.
No.
In a garage no one knows about. They're out in the world. They're being used.
Yep. And this stuff's cherished and being, shared with people. So that's the exciting part. The few parts that I haven't used yet, I have full intentions. The wheels, for instance, I wanted to put on the Ardan car.
Yeah, you tried to put them on multiple different times.
Yeah, and I just decided I didn't like them on that car. But like, since then, I've actually found the matching fronts in 16-inch. So now I have a full set, which is super cool. So the stuff, in the Allard intake, maybe I'll never use it, but it's cool to have. It's being displayed on the wall and it's kept. But I didn't keep everything. So I was able to sell a bunch of the stuff. And if we could teach you anything, if you've been following us forever, we're not really giving away secrets, but we are telling you how I've done it, how we've done it. If you're smart enough into time where you're standing in a building or you're buying a car and there's a bunch of extra parts and you're given the opportunity, you can probably make yourself some money or make the vehicle cheaper and, in the long run. And we've just done that at scale.
Yep.
That's where we're at. But that's probably my most exciting parts find. Definitely my most exciting auction that I was at as far as buying. There's been some other ones, which we can talk about another time, but that one was just crazy. So if you haven't watched that video ever, go back and watch it. You can see Michael put some clips, but the whole video is kind of funny.
Yeah, and if you're just listening to this, if you head to the description, I'll put a link to head to that original video so you can watch it. It'll be in the description.
You can see younger,
skinnier Matt.
That was you see just post Ardan headband.
Yeah.
Now I'm a little more poor, but I have a running
Ardan.
blown Ardan, which is pretty sweet. So that's been really fun. We kind of prompted this discussion because I'm working on the car again.
Yeah.
Now that we've gotten into the fall, and I'm really excited to get that car on the road. It's literally since I got those heads, it was like that was the dream.
Yeah.
And I should tell the quick short story. When I eventually took the heads to Ron, after I got the heads, I was like, I knew I wanted to build them, and then I was like, I'm like, okay, I need to find somebody to build these. I can't do it. You know, I need to. So obviously, Ron had is well known in the hobby and has a reputation to be the guy. And I've going on the Ham and the Ford barn, he's been on there forever, and obviously he's the guy. So our friend Nick the Bandit, who's an older guy who I really enjoy. He's in his 80s now, and Nick was from New England, has knew Ron since Ron was pretty young, and Nick was doing what we're doing in the 70s. Had a business buying in bulk and selling and whatever. So Nick knew Ron, and one time when I was talking to Nick, I said, hey, and like any person that's well known, they get reputations that are sometimes rumors that are not true.
Yeah.
So I had heard from some different people that Ron was only dealt with people that had lots of money, and he's blah blah blah, people that were just dickheads. And I of course was shy because I'm just some punk kid, whatever. So I said, hey Nick, do you think you could maybe get Ron's phone number? Because he doesn't. It's not like it's a speed shop you can just walk into. He much like ourselves, locations kind of not super public. And he gives me his number, and I call Ron, and like, hey, mister, I felt like the little kid, like, in the old movies, like, hey, mister, whatever. And I'm like, hey, I got these Ardan heads, and, I'm in Pennsylvania, and I was wondering if maybe you could possibly be interested to maybe build an engine for me. If you have time, sir, please. I have this little YouTube channel thing.
I have dollars.
Yeah. And he's like, oh, yeah, I know who you are. I watch your videos, and like I know those heads. Like I saw the video. He was like instantly like, oh yeah, and I'm like, holy shit, he knows who we are.
Yeah,
like,
he knows who I am.
Yeah, it's really funny because again, that's with how things work with this hobby. Sometimes the people that you think will be larger than life are like the most down to earth.
Very.
And then sometimes I've met people that have no good excuse to be cocky sons of bitches, and they are.
Yep.
So I was really surprised on that. But it was just so funny because I literally felt like a young kid, like, please, maybe, kind of.
I have these cool things you may be interested in helping me build.
Yeah.
Please.
So super awesome. And that was just the funny kind of wrap up of it. And you guys can watch the video of the engine running, and we did a podcast with Ron and Laura where they talked about their history. So all this stuff kind of ties together. And,
all those videos I'll put in the description.
Yeah, so it's really great. But that's the rambling, the storytelling. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. It's pretty neat to talk about some of the stuff that didn't make it on video or how it led up to it and everything else. And some of you people that met us in person, we've told some of these stories, but that's the kind of
long synopsis.
That's the fairly long version of it. So thank you guys for listening. Again, make sure you subscribe on the audio format if you're interested in listening. In the audio format, we do one every week, and every other week on Sundays we're doing the ones with some visual as well.
Yep.
So just make sure you listen. If you're on the Spotify, Apple, all that stuff, if you give us a review and hit the subscribe button, it's very helpful. Again, the podcast thing, we don't make any money doing this. It's just a fun way for us to put out some more content and also just kind of BS and share with you guys some fun stories of all the adventures we've been on. So thank you guys for listening and watching. We appreciate it. Catch you later.